Hey, what is happening, everybody out there? This is Jakejames Lugo, senior editor here at Koalition.com, and I'm back again with a brand new unboxing and impressions video for you guys here on the channel. We're going to be taking a look at the Evolution of Gamepads book here by Kevin Harbin. I actually got sent this in the mail by Kevin, the author of the book right now. Again, you can see his name right on the book, so big shout outs to Kevin for doing that. But we're going to take a look at the book and give you guys my impressions overall, so it's not going to be so much of an unboxing as much as it is a review. Now, this book, what it really does, it's not necessarily a complete chronicle or a complete culmination of all the different types of game controllers that are out there, like that have ever been created in the world, but it is a good compilation of a bunch of different game controllers looking at the evolution of just controllers in general. I have to give a lot of props to Kevin and the entire team that made this book for pretty much a lot of the different types of controls that they included. Obviously, there's this introduction, obviously a picture of his daughter, and a few other little notes about the book in general. Now, one of my biggest criticisms about this book, if there's any sort of criticisms I can have, is that it has a little bit of an organization issue, meaning that I wasn't necessarily sure at first, as I'm looking through the book now, as you guys could see, again, we're seeing the Atari 2600, we saw the Magnavox Odyssey. I wasn't sure how it was organized, whether it was organized by the actual year that some of these controllers were released or developed, or when they were actually made available to the public, or if they were done alphabetically, or if there was any sort of like specific breakthroughs in the way that controllers are designed. I didn't necessarily know offhand exactly how the book was organized, because to me, looking through it now, again, as I go through each page showing you guys, it feels like it kind of jumps around here and there, depending on the controller, depending on the different company that actually released the controller, or any of the other like stuff that's related to some of the controllers that are featured in here. Now, again, we're getting into the Sega Master System. We saw the NES in here just a second ago. One of the interesting things is that some of the different facts about some of these controllers, I feel like it's a little bit on the slim side. There's certain controllers in here that are stuff that I've never seen before, stuff that I never really looked at before, that I didn't know a lot about, but I wanted to do so. But there was very slim amount of facts that were in there, or at least, a couple sentences about them before moving on to the next controller. So even though, again, Kevin early on in the book, in the introduction, mentions that this isn't really a complete look or a complete, compilation of stuff like that, I still would have at least appreciated a little bit more facts. The other thing, too, again, even though I'm looking at the Sega Genesis controller here, let me go to something. Yeah, this is a perfect example here with the Sega Master System, at least on this page right here. Even though I appreciate the looks and the different images, especially the high-quality images of the controllers themselves, I would have loved to see at least some screenshots for some of the most notable games that these controllers were featured with. Or at least, some of these controllers are, some of the more popular games. Granted, stuff like this. The Sega SG-1000 Joypad. Okay, what types of games was this controller used for? I would have loved in all this white space over here to at least see a screenshot or two of what the games like, that were actually played. Granted, again, this is only a book on the controllers themselves. You could still keep the focus on there, but at least filling up some of this white space would have been appreciated. Now, if I could just go again a little bit earlier, show you another example. Again, here's the Vectrex controller, and here's all this white space over here. Again, show me a screenshot of a game that was played with the Vectrex controller. Let me go a little bit further back even. Just for sake of example, the Mattel and Television. Show me a game, even if it's just one random screenshot of a random game, or at least one of the more popular games that were on there. I don't know if necessarily that was specifically because of a legal thing or a copyright thing or anything of the sort with the construction of the book, because there are controllers like the Atari 2600 controller here that have like 3 pages worth of like stuff devoted to it. Granted, these are just images, and I would have appreciated a little bit more facts. But then you got controllers like these, which again, they don't really have much, related to them. There isn't really much shown. There's stuff like the Intern VC4000 that's got all these images of like some of these overlays. I would have appreciated maybe a little bit more facts or just some images of the controllers, of the controllers in action, or some of the games that were played. Even here, again, looking at the Magnavox Odyssey, show me at least a screenshot of the Magnavox Odyssey games being played, just straight from it. Again, I don't know how easy it is to get that stuff and all the legal stuff, but that's something to keep, in mind if you're someone interested in picking up this book. Now, the other thing I also want to mention here, going back here with the Sega Genesis controller. Now, again, for me personally, as someone that actually grew up within this era, of gaming. I find this to be a little bit slim, and also with the organization issues that I mentioned earlier, some of the other controllers that were related to the Sega Genesis controller that were kind of like iterations of this, they're all further into the back of the book. You know, as opposed to like maybe organizing the book by company or organizing the book by era or decade or something of the sort. It kind of sucks. Like, I read this and I want to know more about this type of controller or what the company made with this type of controller afterwards. I have to go all the way back here, you know, to find it. I'll show you guys the actual 6-button controller, which was, again, very important for that era, you know, for someone like me. You actually go there. There's the Super Nintendo controller. Did I go past it? Pretty sure I went past it. That actually went there. Again, there's a lot of other types of like controllers that are featured beforehand before we actually get to the 6-button controller, which is all the way over here. That's that much of the book. You know, I want to say from page 33 all the way to like 52. Whole bunch of pages that are all these other controllers before I get to the next iteration of this same controller. Again, it's an organization issue. It's a big nitpick. I understand that. And it could be any number of reasons why that wasn't the case, but still, that's something that's noteworthy. But again, like, there's a bunch of facts in here about the controller, okay, or at least a bunch of little tidbits of info about it. But again, no images of the games that really featured or really gave a reason for owning this controller. From having grown up in this era, I know that obviously Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, the wrestling games, and a bunch of other later Sega Genesis games really justified owning that. But again, nothing of that is featured here. There's a lot of white space and stuff. So again, that's one of probably my biggest criticism. Now, the other thing I want to get back to is these random facts. I appreciate these. These are cool. But again, they do feel a little bit too random, kind of like thrown into the mix, especially when this one's talking about the NES and I'm looking at the Sega Genesis right here. Like, I would have appreciated if something like this was all the way back here, right on this page right here. Instead of the Sega SG-1000, I could see that, because obviously the Konami code was kind of in relation to Contra with the NES controller and the NES. Something like that at least would have been a little bit more, again, made more sense to someone like me. Now, again, as I go through the rest of the actual, book, just to show you guys, again, some of my other thoughts, you know, as this unboxing impressions, more impressions than unboxing. You know, there's a lot of controllers that are featured here from every single decade up till now, which is cool. Again, we have the original PlayStation controller, because funny enough, the PlayStation Classic just came out not too long ago, so it's good to see something like this again, you know, knowing that came out afterwards. But again, also white space, no images, no other like images of the controller themselves, no other variations. Speaking of variations, and again, getting away from what I mentioned with the 6-button controller with the Sega Genesis, there was a lot more variations of the Nintendo 64 controller that aren't featured in this book. Now, towards the later end of the book, which is all the way back here, I could actually show you guys, they do touch on, or Kevin touches on, the color variations of the Nintendo 64 controller. One of the things that they don't touch on, though, unfortunately, which I think is still very important, is some of the other variations of the controller with the design of it. For example, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu, or not Let's Go Pikachu, or Hey You Pikachu, I'm sorry, which had the microphone and also the Pikachu decal on the actual N64 controller and the N64 console itself. Stuff like that is not mentioned in this book whatsoever, which I think is very important, because that was another big title, another big iteration for the N64 controller that was actually a pretty big hit for people that love Pokemon. But it's stuff like that that I feel is important that's completely left out of this book, as well as also some of the other peripherals that you guys could see with the N64 controller. Again, we have the Rumble Pack, we have the Transfer Pack. Where's the controller pack? You know, there's a big white space over here, and I feel like maybe an image in there just didn't get included in the book or so, but something like the controller pack, which is very important to anybody that owns an N64, should be in here. So in addition to that, okay, again, as I keep going on through most of this stuff, what I do appreciate, to add a little bit more positivity here, I do appreciate some of the multi-tap stuff, which is what we're looking at now. The ability to actually connect multiple controllers to some of these older consoles, you know, for 4-player action. This is very cool. This is some of the Sega Genesis ones. He actually has the boomerang here for the PlayStation multi-tap. That was a big deal for anybody that owns an original PlayStation. Stuff like that is pretty cool. What I also love, too, which, again, if I could get to it, I could actually show you guys. He actually has a whole section devoted to the inputs. Here we go, the connectors for every single controller, at least that I think is featured in this book, as far as I understand. We have a whole bunch of different ones that are kind of labeled. I wish that the labels, rather than being on the bottom of the page, would actually be next to the specific connectors. I think that, again, there's all this white space that would have been really good to actually have that next to it, so I know, not have to go like search on the bottom and stuff like that, even though it's labeled. It would have been a little bit much more easier on the eyes for someone like me. But again, then we get into some of the other random controllers, which are a little bit more third-party stuff. And he even says in the very beginning of the book that it focused mostly on the first-party controller releases, which is okay, which is fine, which is good and stuff. But again, if we're going to feature some of the actual other third-party stuff, it would have been nice to see some of the other iterations of third-party controllers for some of the big releases, you know, some of the big consoles. Again, during the 16-bit era, 32, and obviously the 64-bit era. One of the other things that I think I could mention also that's not featured in this book, and he talks a little bit about it in the introduction, none of the actual alternative types of controllers, like for example the Guitar Hero controllers, are in here. He actually completely omits them, even though he talks a little bit about them. But the other one too that I think is also a big, absentee here, is the actual arcade controllers. Places for like Mad Catz, Hori, that had various different arcade sticks for fighting games and other types of like arcade games during some of these eras. Again, even before the original PlayStation, like the 16-bit era with Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, there was a lot of different controllers that were released back then that I feel like should have at least gotten a little bit of a nod. There are some 6-button controllers in here that look like arcade sticks that do make some sort of appearance. If I could find them, I could show you guys. Not necessarily designed like a controller, but an actual arcade stick. They are mentioned here, but the majority of the ones that I think that should have been mentioned, or at least given a nod, are not included in here whatsoever. He does include stuff like the mouse from the SNES, and I think he has a couple others that are very similar to this included in here. But again, this being not a complete look at all the different stuff when it comes to involving controllers, I feel like has a couple big omissions that should have been included in here. That's probably my biggest criticism aside from the organization stuff. This is actually pretty cool. This is a cool nod. I would have actually loved if this was more towards the beginning of the book, where, again, this is the first appearance of the D-pad, where it's from the Game & Watch games that Nintendo was making. And this is why Nintendo has an actual copyright, or at least a trademark, on the D-pad. This is why everybody's D-pad is a little bit different on different consoles. So anyway, another thing I should mention, again, this is another little nitpick, but a lot of the controllers and a lot of the hardware that's pictured here does have a lot of that decolorization in it. Again, some of the pictures and the images that he got of these controllers come from his personal collection and other collections that he's actually collaborated with. They have that discoloration where this controller here, for example, wasn't yellow. It wasn't having that beige look. It was actually like a grayish, like a solid gray, kind of like similar to this, but a little bit more brighter. So at least it would have been nice to at least see a little bit of a nod to things like that, even though he touches on various different stuff that's similar to that over time. But anyway, overall, if you're someone that loves retro gaming, if you're someone that loves collecting game-related books like me, I think this is an interesting book to take a look at. I think it's an interesting book to add to your collection. Is it a must-own? That's very debatable. That's debatable on how much you actually love retro gaming hardware, as well as also just different types of variations and perspectives when it comes to different types of stuff like this. So anyway, that's my thoughts overall on the Evolution of Gamepads book by Kevin Harbin. Again, big shout outs to him for sending this book over to me. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this unboxing and impressions, or more impressions than anything else. Leave me a comment down below in the comment section. Tell me what you guys think about this book, or if there's any other suggestions of gaming books or other tech and hardware that you guys want me to take a look at in this series. Put in the comment section down below. Don't forget to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the Koalition's YouTube channel for all our videos just like this one. I will talk to all of you guys again very soon. Peace out and stay epic, everybody.